Hello, it's Brother Gerald, YouTube philosopher, and today we look at the institution of marriage. And in looking at the institution of marriage, we have to look at the institution as it was established in the beginning. Because if we don't see what it looked like in the beginning and we look at it today, we can get the wrong impression on what marriage is truly all about. Because today we see men fleeing from marriage, being reluctant to enter into this agreement, and we also see society suffering as a result of marriage becoming a perverted and twisted institution. And we've gone so far as to assign marriage to two men coming together to become one flesh. And we see two women being accused of entering into marriage and becoming one flesh. But the one key that God gives us to hold on to is that in the marriage relationship, not only will two become one flesh, but they will be fruitful and they will be able to multiply as a result of this joining together. And the joining together is on a physical level, but the physical level is to establish a spiritual reality. And in the physical coming together of the man and the woman, the bearing and yielding of fruit is emblematic of a spiritual reality, in that when two come together and are one, and they're in love, they're in this union of love, they will bear much fruit, and they will create many things, many good things. And we see this being reflected in the Genesis story of creation, where God creates the heavens and the earth. He creates all life, all living things on this earth. And he basically says, as he's doing all these things, that this is good. So, here it is. In coming together, we have the power and ability to create life. We are able to participate in God using the bodies that he gave us to come together with another human being and cleaving one to the other. Because this is what the Bible describes in the beginning with the very first man and the very first woman. And for this cause, a man shall leave his father and mother's house, and he shall cleave unto his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So we see in this cleaving, this bonding, this binding together of these two people, they now become a new creature. But the unusual thing about this is that in the beginning, God, when he made man, he made him in his image. So let's just look at the physical image of this creature called man. Man has one head. He has a body. And he has limbs that enable him to do, that enable him to go and to take action. So too, when the man and the woman come together and become one flesh, their body should resemble the same body or it should have a similitude of sameness in the organization of the body as an individual. It should have one head. It should have one body, and having one body, it should have a mind that intends to do, and the intention of this one mind is to reflect the character of God just as it was organized and arranged to do from the beginning. So, as an individual, I wake up in the morning and I pray to God. I say, "Good morning, God. Thank you for giving me another day." And I look forward to going out and being honest in my dealings. And I look forward to receiving blessing from your hand, because I understand that in interacting with all these other human beings in this world, something good shall come out of it, provided that I'm seeking to be blessed. I'm not seeking an advantage over my brother. I'm seeking to interact with my brother in such a way that the interaction will be God honoring and God exalting. So too, when I get married and I have a wife, I wake up in the morning and my wife and I will come together and we shall pray and ask God to bless us as we go out to do those things that He has established for us to do. If it's working a job, then just as a single man, I would get up and ask God to bless me in all my dealings. So too, I should be doing the same thing with my wife. And so when we separate ourselves to go out into this world, to be honest in our dealings, we'll interact with other women and other men in a way that reflects God's character. And this is the problem that I see in marriages today. We see men going out and not reflecting God's character. They deny that they're married by wanting and desiring to be with other women in the same manner that they have committed themselves to be with their wives. And we also see women doing the same thing. So it's not the institution of marriage that's the problem. It's the participants that don't seem to understand what marriage truly was intended to do for those that chose to enter into that agreement. And the agreement is not only witnessed by these two making this vow, they're witnessed by the public, other men and other women, through this marriage ceremony, where in going through this ceremony, you're making it known so that none will have any excuse to say, "Well, I didn't know she was married. I didn't know that he was married." Because if you didn't witness the ceremony in particular, you weren't a first-hand witness of this thing, then you will be a third-party witness, because it's the obligation and the duty of the husband as well as the wife to make it known. Now, here in America, we have wedding rings that are supposed to be a objective symbol whereupon which you really don't have to tell anybody that you're married. But in the event that you don't wear a wedding ring, the wedding ring should be on your mind, in that if somebody approaches you and finds you interesting and attractive, that you would be willing to voluntarily tell them that you're married. And if that wasn't sufficient, if none of those things was even sufficient, you should understand that God also witnessed you taking this vow. And He's not one to be mocked. He's not one to be played with in an institution that He created to truly reflect His character. Because we see in the later books of the Old Testament, we see God relating to the nations as being a part of his family. And the relationship was reflected in him looking at these different nations throughout the world as being his children. But then when these nations started deviating from the standard of reflecting his character as he instructed them to do, he called them whores. So the relationship infidelity is relative to an intimacy that is lost. And this is the idea that God is conveying when you look at the story in Isaiah where God is dealing with his people. We see in the book of Jeremiah, as well as all the prophets, where God ascended these prophets to instruct and redirect these people to become God honoring once again, but they didn't want to do it. They killed most of these prophets. And so ultimately God gives them up. They go into bondage, they go into slavery, and when they actually get the full view of their disobedience, they cry out to God. And many are moved to repentance, but many are moved to become even more bitter. And they start shaking their fist at God when basically all of these miserable things that have manifested in their life were the direct result of their disobedience to doing what God told them to do. You shall cleave and be bound and glued to this other person as one flesh. And that other person really didn't intend to have you run around, sleeping around with other men or other women. And God neither expected or intended for you to do that either. So all of these things come to fruition as a result of us playing dumb or us doing what we want to do. And we can't do what we want to do because, one, these bodies that were given to us, they're limited in what they're able to do. And thank God he has limited us from living forever in these bodies, because I think if we didn't see and understand through the decline of our abilities as human beings just how wicked and vile we would really become, because we've become pretty wicked and vile. We have the ability to destroy this world with the knowledge of nuclear power, the knowledge of biological and chemical warfare. And all of these things just demonstrate how marred we have made the image of God and how it manifests itself in this world is obviously not being a good thing. So I hope that in just contemplating and seeing this thing in the terms that I presented, that it will enable us to think a little more clearly, a little more soberly about these things in order to go back to getting true blessings, because that's one thing the New Testament talks about. We can get desperately hopeless when we see just how ruined and wrecked things are, but thanks be to God, he's given us a way out. And he didn't have to do that necessarily, but because he is such a good God, he did give us this one way out. And in taking this route of escape, which is trusting and believing in Jesus and doing what he commands you to do, once you recognize the sacrifice he made, once you recognize he's your creator, he's going to start telling you to do things. And many of these things he's going to tell you to do is going to be contrary to your sensibilities, but your sensibilities have been so jacked up that you will have a mind to hesitate in doing what he told you to do. But trust me, if you do what he asks you to do, you will start to receive blessings. And then you'll start to prove those very things that were told to you from the beginning as being true and good. So with that, I depart. Peace to you all.